Hello friends, Pastor Bill Walden here with Build Up the Church. Hope you're doing super great. This is a devotional word for July 19th, 2024, and this is out of the book of Acts, chapter 23. The Apostle Paul, after he became a Christian, always had a great desire to preach Christ to his Jewish brothers. Paul was raised as a Pharisee, taught by the great Rabbi Gamaliel, and he was very committed to the Jewish faith, so much so that he would hunt down Christians and have them imprisoned or would be consenting to their death. And that happened until Paul became a Christian. He had an encounter with Jesus. From that point, Paul had a deep, deep desire to preach Christ to the Jewish people, to show them that Jesus was their long predicted Messiah. In Acts chapter 22, we see the Apostle Paul, having been warned 3 times to not go to Jerusalem. We see him in Jerusalem. He goes into the temple area. It is thought that the Apostle Paul broke Jewish law by bringing a Gentile into the temple area. It wasn't the truth, but the rumor got started and a riot erupted. The people there were beating Paul to death. The Roman guards stopped it. Put Paul into protective custody, but as he was going into the Antonia fortress, Paul asked for permission to speak to the crowd. He began to speak to them in their own language, in Hebrew. He began to relate to them and was telling them about Jesus until he mentioned the fact that God wanted to bring the good news of salvation to Gentiles, and then the crowd just went crazy again. Paul was taken into custody. The next day, he was presented before the Jewish leaders, and Paul once again had an opportunity to preach Christ to his Jewish brethren. He wanted to show them from the Old Testament scriptures that Jesus was the Messiah. There was a huge debate. There was a huge dissension. There was a huge fight about it. Paul was once again taken into protective custody by the Romans. And we pick up the story here in Acts chapter 23, just one verse, but so meaningful. Paul's desire was to preach Christ to the Jews, and he got 2 opportunities, and neither one of them went well, and now he's in jail. And you can only imagine that he's extremely frustrated, he's extremely discouraged, disappointed, and fearful. And we see the wonderful appearance of Jesus with him. Acts 23, verse 11. But the following night the Lord stood by him and said, "Be of good cheer. Be of good cheer, Paul, for as you have testified for me in Jerusalem, so you must also bear witness at Rome." Jesus appears in a physical discernible form, and tells Paul, I want you to cheer up. Usually when you see something like that, it means that a person is not cheerful. When the Bible says, don't be afraid, it's usually because they're afraid. When it says, be of good cheer or be strengthened, be encouraged, it means they were discouraged. They were sad. They were afraid. And Jesus shows up in that prison cell with the Apostle Paul and says, be of good cheer, Paul. And this is why. As you have testified for me in Jerusalem, so you must also bear witness in Rome. In other words, your life calling is not over yet. I have things for you to do. I know you're afraid right now. I know that you're in jail. Paul didn't know it, but the next day there would be 40 Jewish men sworn to not eat or drink until they had murdered Paul. And so his life was going to be very much in danger. He would be taken down to Caesarea, and he would be imprisoned for another 2 years. But this word from Jesus is basically this: Paul, as you have testified for me in Jerusalem. In other words, well done on that. I know it didn't turn out the way you thought. Well done. In the same way, you must also bear witness at Rome. Paul, nothing's going to happen to you. Your life is not going to be taken from you until you have fulfilled your calling. Until you have fulfilled the ministry, Jesus would say to Paul, until you have fulfilled those things that I have designed and called you to do. So be encouraged. Yes, it's been discouraging. Yes, you've been in danger. Yes, they've tried to kill you, but I have plans for you. So if God has plans for you, nothing can come against you. Nothing can successfully come against you. There's an interesting verse in the book of Acts also, in Acts chapter 13, talking about King David. It says this, for David, after he had served his own generation by the will of God, fell asleep and was buried with his fathers. When did David's life end? When he fulfilled his calling. After he had served his own generation by the will of God, God had plans for David to serve his generation. And when those plans were completed, he got to go to heaven. Jesus here in Acts chapter 23 is telling Paul the same thing. Your life's not going to end. You're going to go to Rome and you're going to testify of me there. Just as you have here, you've done well. It's not over yet. What's the message for us? I believe that same truth is true for Christians today. Excuse me. God has a plan for your life. He has a calling for your life. As you are pursuing that plan, as you are walking in that calling, He's with you and He's going to protect you. Nobody's going to stop it until that calling is complete. And then when it is, you graduate to heaven. God is with you, Christian. Paul says in Romans chapter 8, if God be for us, who can be against us? And I've heard it paraphrased this way. If God is for us, who could successfully be against us? People might be against us. Satan certainly is against us. The demonic realm is against us, but not successfully. Not until we're done running our race. Then we graduate, we go to heaven. So Christian, run in your lane. Fulfill your calling. Seek out to the Lord. Seek the Lord on what He wants you to do and do it with all your might. And then when He's done with you, you graduate up to heaven. So some things to think about. Thanks for watching.